First thing I wanted to share with the board this evening are the goals and focus areas for 23-24. So I'm going to pass this document around for the board members. And the first page has just the mission and vision, and then the comprehensive plan goals, which are 3-year goals from 2023 through 2026. And they're divided up into the different categories of curriculum, communications, early literacy, community partners, and then leadership. And you'll see that there are 3 curriculum goals written there, but it's really all 3 of those go together and develop the written curriculum to establish high standards of learning for all children. And then 3 within that are the planned instruction, the proficiency scales, and the common assessments for all 3 of those. And we're already into that goal, but that's going to be a pretty lofty goal, but it will take a lot of professional development and just a lot of dedication of really putting our minds to getting that down. So it's like anything else, when you have a great game plan, then good things happen. So we have to have consistent game plans across the board. So if I'm in a 2nd grade classroom, or if my kid's in a 2nd grade classroom, I shouldn't think that they're going to get something less or more because they're in that classroom versus the one down the hall or the one across town. So we recognize that as something we really have to focus on, is really having that strong written plan across the board. So I would like to schedule, I think I told the board, the committee meeting. If we can fit a committee meeting in to give an update on the social studies work, the science work, and some other pieces of the curriculum. And then we'll also need a time with facilities committee to get back together too.
Before the start of the school year, or are you saying September?
So we have a date that we set aside at Tuesday, August 22nd was set aside for a committee meeting date. And if that doesn't work, then we can go into September and use the September date. I'd like to use that August 22nd date if we could.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Facilities, August 22nd.
Same thing.
Would that be during the day or the evening?
No, in the evening. Yeah.
Like 6 o'clock or?
I think we set the time at 5:30. I'll get the official date out and we'll put an announcement out.
So speaking of facilities, back in June, late June, we were told CEC would need 2 months to get the specs together for a new
The
project.
HVAC project.
Right. Are they still, we're 2 weeks away from 2 months. Are we still kind of close to that? Or
We are. Their engineers are working on the specs now, and then as soon as they have those specs, we can get it out to bid. So last we spoke with them, we're probably not at those September meetings, but we're probably before the October meetings.
Okay. I think when we get to that point, we can discuss a special meeting, because the sooner we bid that out, the better.
I agree.
Better off this time.
The communications goal, develop district-wide system of communication to increase parent and family engagement. This is one that Mrs. Tamer is already starting on putting together a communications plan. Part of our new website was part of this goal too. It's integrated better with social media. It's easier to send messages out. We've been using School Messenger. That's going to go away with we'll have a district app that people can have on their phones. So all of that will be part of that overall communications plan. But the communications plan will include things like any communications that come out from the school in print, that they should be consistent. Again, Hutchinson shouldn't have a different format than Metzger, than the middle school, than the high school. So we're trying to align communications to make it easier for parents, especially those parents that have kids in multiple buildings, that we have a plan to, and protocols for how we communicate. Early literacy, system-wide approach to early literacy education to build a foundation of learning for all children. Again, something that we're already working toward. Community partners and professional capital, build relationships and sustainable partnerships with local businesses, industry, and higher learning centers to increase social and professional capital for our children. And then under leadership, develop an understanding of leadership as genuine concern by providing professional learning sessions for all staff and students to develop self-agency, mental fitness, promote the general welfare of the GS community. This is one that we'll focus on day one with our whole staff. What is leadership? What does that really mean? And we will have, General Jones will be there to address the staff. We'll have our teachers, 5 of them are at Semper Fi Odyssey this week, and we'll have them talking a little bit about that. But what does it truly mean to lead? Because all of the goals up above that, don't be for naught if we don't truly get to leading our kids and what that really means. So we really want to develop that with all of our staff and then getting it to our students. On the second page, there are some goals from the superintendent's office and central office. So develop 5- and 10-year facility finance plan to effectively communicate to the greater community our shared commitment to children, families, and taxpayers. Collaborate with the YMCA and City of Greensburg to plan a shared tennis and pickleball facility to increase recreation space, community engagement, and develop a shared commitment to community development. Staff and professional development. This is one that I want to get involved with all staff. Engage all educational staff in personal and professional development on leadership as genuine concern through a book study of What Happened to You, which is a book that all the administrators already have. All of the teachers will be getting that book, and it really dives deep into the biological science of what is happening in the brain, especially with children, from stress and trauma, and how do we stop saying what, instead of saying, what's the matter with you, it's what happened to you, that there's something there. And sometimes what we see with kids in the classroom, it is because of what has happened to them, and it's biological as far as what's happening in their brain. And we need to understand that in working with people as what is really going on. And we've learned a lot about that in working with the Wounded Warriors at Semper Fi Odyssey, an awful lot about that, and you can see it. Student learning.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So you're saying asking our teachers to do that, but if this is coming from something that is working with wounded veterans, they're a little bit older and may have gone through, I'm not saying all trauma, like different levels. Like one of the Wounded Warriors could have seen their friend pass, they could have lost limbs and arms and be 30-some years old. How does that relate to?
So here's a great example. So there's a story in the book of a child in therapy, and the child was acting out in a teacher's classroom over and over and over again, acting out in what was going on. And the therapist, who's the author of the book, finally started to figure out with this child, when his father left him at an early age, the father had beaten him at a very early age, 1, 2, 3 years old, physical, verbal abuse, and what actually connected was the cologne that the teacher was wearing was the same cologne that the father wore. And when the teacher stopped wearing that cologne, the child wasn't acting. And it's a fight or flight mechanism in the brain, that the brain is reacting to a sensation that it had dealt with in the past. And the kid was just the kid's brain is just reacting in the most basic mode of fight or flight based on a previous experience. For us to think about that in the classroom with kids of many things. Last week at Outdoor Odyssey, there were foster kids up there. Those traumas were hideous compared to what the Wounded Warriors looked at. And, a girl who was there, she actually was there all week and found out halfway through the week you're not going back to the same house that you came up here, you're going to a different home. And just all of those things, but it's what's happening in the brain when stress hits. And it's not just that, it's with our own stress,
I guess
what's
I just
happening.
misunderstood. I thought it was what you learned at Semper Fi working with not, it was the student part. I thought it was what you learned from
Yeah.
being with the veterans.
And a lot of what
I
we're learning
apologize.
with the veterans is just what's happening up here when you're feeling what you're feeling in your body. And what our educators are finding out is the same things that we feel in our stress levels, it's the same. The trauma is completely different. The stresses are completely different, but your body's reaction. And so if we understand that, then we can better understand how to regulate. And once we start to regulate that stress, then we can then co-regulate, and that's what.
I just took it from the wrong. I thought it was
Yeah, yeah.
working directly with
No.
the book from how to work with the Semper Fi thing,
No,
not
the
students.
book
I
is,
missed
the
that
book
part.
is more about kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed that. Sorry.
The student learning, we have a group of students that are very, very interested in writing objectives or observable measures for character, leadership, scholarship, and service. To not just say that, because we need measures to say, how do we know that that kid is a kid of high character? We don't have an answer to that right now, but what we do have are 24 students. We're reaching out to some teachers, and they are and they already set their goal that we will have these by, what they say, January 31st, 2024. And then they want to come and present to you in February. What they really want to do is to be able to script what it means to be a class graduate. That if you're of high character, and we've talked about even the incentives. Do you get a cord for character? Do you get a cord for leadership? Right now it's kids in NHS, and it's character, leadership, scholarship, service. But where are the objective measures of those? And that's what we want to work on this year. Community engagement, we want to create a community partner directory for access to industry-based learning opportunities and connections. So when our students are looking for, I need to find a place to do a job shadow or career mentoring. For a lot of our students, they don't have that social capital and that professional capital, so we want to help them by giving them something that here are people that are trusted that you can reach out to, that we've already connected with. And then I have others there that are on post. So classroom level focus areas, we want to see in the classrooms clearly communicated learning targets for every lesson, every day, their standards aligned. Ongoing documentation or documented communication to parents and guardians about student progress, struggles, or success. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to parents and that we're reaching out to them when we see struggles in the classroom. Are we documenting that? Do we know that we're effectively communicating with parents throughout the way? Clearly established behavioral norms for every class with student input. So we want to engage kids in behavioral norms in every single classroom. The more that we can do that and set up those norms and have ownership of those norms, then the better classroom management we can have across the board.
Isn't that already in the student manual? That they have to sign off on at the beginning of the year? Because there's behavioral expectations and, many things that are already covered in that. And overall, outside of maybe, we have behaviors expected for, like, don't cut your finger off with these machines. Most of the behavioral expectations should be more or less the same across the board, and they already sign off on that. So I guess I don't understand.
They are, but there's an instructional practice that really helps. So what we see in classrooms when the teacher really makes it a point to have the behavioral norms up in front and making sure that they're reflecting on those constantly. Okay, we're transitioning right now. Let's remember the norm for how we're communicating with each other in this transition. It's constantly reinforcing positive behavior with students. But if that positive behavior is not reinforced, it's okay, we're transitioning right now, go ahead and transition. They're kids, so we have to train them. So the more that we do it, it's the same as as coaching. If you set up those norms of behavior even in coaching, then your team develops better into just understanding. So we really want to focus on, we can help with the little distractions and create a better learning environment if we're all on the same page of reinforcing those same norms. So you're correct, they're already there, so you're not starting from scratch, but how are we reinforcing them constantly
So
throughout
is
the
this
day?
like a reminder for teachers of you really should consider doing this in your classroom? It will make your life and everybody's go more smoothly?
Yeah, and this year it's like it's a reminder to do it, but it's also like, hey, if we're coming in, like we want to see it, like
Okay.
we want it out there.
Should be
as we're
posted
doing
on
it.
the boards?
Well, I just stress, because Bo hasn't been in elementary school for a while, but Mrs. Dingle has a great way, I remember her transitioning on how she goes, and if it was hand signals, can you,
So, I mean, and it, I think elementary does it,
yeah,
and, you know, different teachers do it different ways, but just when we're doing anything within the classroom, like things are posted, that, I mean, just different ways that we get attention, like, you know, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, or, and like, we'll give different things for different, but when we come in, I know what my expectations I want them to be, but the kids help write the expectations. And when they're writing them and then they're posted and we talk about them and we practice them, like for first grade especially, like they're practiced. You know, first month of school, that's, you know, part of our academics is practicing what those are. Kids can sign off on things and see them, but like we're a full month into how do we transition? What does this look like? What do we do? So that it does become a norm as we go through the day. But I do think, I mean, I just know first grade and I know younger elementary, that is just something that we do, but I'm sure like, it's great to have everybody have that posted.
It's almost like you have a tiered system of behaviors, and like you have your district-wide behaviors that all students have. Then you go down into your schools, elementary, middle, high schools have different expectation just because of grade levels. And then when you go into different classrooms, each teacher may set their setups and transitions differently. So they teach their students the behaviors in their classrooms. And those would be expectations to uphold for all students when they walk into that classroom.
I was mostly thinking of high school, and I was like, well,
You know, every grade level should have those expectations, yes, of learning. Yes.
didn't even put you on the spot. You knew what you, I mean, I remembered how you guys did, and Kristen did it in the
And then
library.
assessments align with skills
Yeah.
articulated in the standards for learning. So, just wanted to share that with you. Those are some of the things that will be coming out. District NWEA data, Lenny, I'll pass these out. This is so the discussion of NWEA versus, you know, state data. NWEA is the diagnostic and benchmark test that we're using through title funds, federal funds, that gives us 3 points of assessment data to see where the kids are. It'll tell us in the fall where they are, and then when they take it again in the winter, how much did they grow, and then in the spring, how much did they grow. But we're also getting information on what can we predict the kid, how far, if they get great instruction, where should they be predicted to grow. And the nice thing about that is then it gives us data on each individual kid or groups of students as to how effective were we in getting there. Did we get that projected growth, or did we miss it by a lot? And if we missed it by a lot, what questions do we have to ask? What was the instruction like? What was the curriculum like? What was, when you start diving into individual kids, you can get into a whole lot of questions into individual kids of what might be happening with them. But it gives us immediate data. So we've been able to work with this data since May and starting to look at where kids are to prep for the new school year
And-
versus the state data, which
The data
we're still
sheets
waiting
that
on.
she's going to show you, these are new from NWEA this school year. So they used to give us these charts that just said growth in the schools. Well, now they're breaking it down, achievement, growth, and then they're breaking it down into classroom profiles. And then, of course, we always had our student profiles. But this report you see in front of you is brand new for them to roll out to us. So our principals, when they saw this, like, oh my God, this is good data for us to start using to say what is going on in our schools. And then we as district leaders said this tells us a lot about the things that are going on. And it provokes different questions on all different levels. So there's no right or wrong answer right now to answer to the data, because that's something you have to analyze based on that situation of that classroom.
So what you're seeing is like a 30,000-foot view of the data. Because from here, where our principals and teachers can go, they can now start digging really deep down to just individual students and individual children. So you're seeing 30,000 foot. That very first page, what you're seeing under middle school, this is middle school mathematics. The growth is at the top, and you can see the two sessions that we're comparing there are the fall session compared to the spring session. So at the bottom, the achievement, you can see how the achievement grew from the 58th percentile up to the 63rd percentile. So math at the middle, if you look at the middle school overall, math looks good. And what I can tell you diving in is, it looks really good 6th grade, good 7th grade, not so great 8th grade. So that brings up other questions then. Now you start digging into the 8th grade. But we already know, written curriculum, you've got a goal for that. So when you start looking at that, you start talking to teachers, it's, okay, well, we haven't focused as much. 6th grade spent all year really focused on the written curriculum and what they were doing. But again, you can't just look at that and say, oh, that's the reason. That's simple, but it can be an answer in that data analysis of what is going on or what's not going on. So the other good thing about the NWEA, it's normed on all NWEA, so it's any NWEA test internationally
So
on the same.
14 million students that they take in account to do the statistics on this data.
Versus just state of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So again, you flip the next two pages, you'll see that 6th grade was in the 73rd percentile of growth in here. That's really good, and they did fairly well with achievement. How will this compare with PSSAs? That was a question we asked in our analysis meeting, and there's a data sheet that we can find from the fall of where they projected to fall in the PSSA. So we'll be able to take that projection, compare it to how they performed on the PSSA, and say, is there correlation there, and can we trust that? Because the answer to what will the public see, the public data is PSSA Keystone, as of right now in the state of Pennsylvania. But for our purposes, this gives us data at hand, immediate, easier to use, and we're able to start in May to plan for the new school year with this data. There's no high school data here. That doesn't mean the high school didn't take the test, but we had some, what do you say, bad data in,
Yes.
bad data out. So
It's just the time.
in learning how to set up
test
the
and whatnot.
tests, we just didn't have, the sessions weren't set up correctly to get the data back. But we could get data off individual students, but not bigger data. So we can dive into this more with an education meeting.
Because that's where it was just like what the first line meant, so they ranked 62nd.
So that's the 62nd percentile of growth,
Yes.
which means that it's good.
That's good.
If it's
So
green,
there's
it's
a-
good.
Yeah, if it's green, it's good.
That's
But-
what I didn't
Green and
understand
blue
the
are
colors.
good. Yeah, green
Okay.
Yeah, if it were 99, that would be great. Yeah. So, yeah.
So like, then if we look at it, it says achievement fall of 2022, if they were 55th, but now, when they did it in the spring, we went up 8 percentages.
They achieved,
8,
they grew in their achievement
Yes,
okay,
compared from fall
yes.
to
Okay.
the spring.
and then overall,
So
they ranked
overall,
62. Okay,
But you'll
that's
find
just-
some in there where
I
the
saw.
achievement dropped
Yeah.
and therefore the growth was very low.
And so that's where you can look
And
and
that's
see
where we-
what happened at that
Yes.
point in time.
Mhm.
Now, are we seeing a difference that because of those, unfortunate, years?
Those grade levels that were most affected, we are seeing gaps there, yes. And that would be the eighth, second.
That's
Second.
third.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did, yes.
And do we have information to see from, like, 'cause this is middle school, I think,
That goes all the way down to kindergarten.
okay, all right. So we
Does
can
this
see
have
the
any-
grade between elementary and middle school.
How many students do we have in middle school?
Sorry. 500.
Total,
Brian,
just under,
you will
right around
see
600.
In the very last column on each chart, you'll see a number there, that's the total number of students that took the test there.
Well, the thing that jumped out at me is, you know, for the mathematics, 513 students at the middle school, but then 428 students at Hutchinson. I would have thought that the out there would have been higher.
So that, not all students then completed the test.
Right.
What I just passed around, Lenny, you might be able to explain this better, a family guide to math growth. So it's just something that parents will be able to look at to help them understand a little bit about the data, because we do send home the data reports for the math assessments for parents. And parents will be getting the PSSA information as soon as we get the official letters from the state. We'll get those into the mail, but we don't, that's usually September.
Yeah, this just explains what the RIT score means on the very back, how it's normative data, and how the test is adaptable to what the students can do. So it's only measuring what they're able to do on their zone of proximal development. So when a teacher goes in and look at a student profile report, the data that comes up is so rich that it'll tell them, this is where they're at, this is what needs reinforced, and on students that are high flyers, it'll say, this is what you can start developing them on. So, and it gives you specific information on what they can start to learn, just not stating a standard.
Okay. So I think, you know, if you're able to make it on the 22nd, we can take a deeper dive into that. And then when we get the Future Ready Index data, we'll give that information to you as well. So for next week, we have on the superintendent's report, we'll have the personnel items. We'll have under contracts, contracted services, an agreement with IUP for interns, an agreement for our Title I non-public with Catapult Learning.
What does that mean, non-public, because we're public?
So in our title grants, we have to submit applications for all non-public schools that are participating in the Title I, II, or IV grants. That's a federal requirement from the state. And so each year, I have to reach out to the schools to see if they want to participate. This year, we have 5 schools participating, and so it's my job to communicate back and forth with them to submit their grant to the state.
Those are
Doesn't
just
seem
schools
very
in our
fair.
area, our district.
They are students from Greensburg State. Title I is any child that goes to any non-public school that wants to participate. Title II is just in our area.
Which is what 11.3 that is tied to Title II.
And next week, I will give you the breakdown of those grants, and the non-public schools get around $14,000, close to $15,000 in Title I, and I think it was close to $8,500 in Title II this year.
Okay, 11.4 is an item that, when Scott Meritzer was here in July, and he mentioned the add-on, the $20,000 for the outdoor basketball court to do the sealant and the line painting and all of those. Does anyone want to have a discussion on that? That's recommended approval to add $20,000 to the outdoor classroom project.
I mean, it sounds high, but I'm not like
Paints and
I'm not a
lines.
painting and sealing kind of person. So
We can change that to not exceed, because I don't believe that's not, I think we need to just put to not exceed $20,000.
Is that the actual cost, or is it gonna be below $20,000?
Yeah, what's their estimate?
What's the actual
'Cause
cost?
that seems.
The estimate that came in from CH&D, or the estimated add-on, was $20,000.
So did they bid that out type thing because,
It was all in the bid document.
yeah, so, oh, it's them additional too, because
Yes.
there's,
It's the same company doing, who's doing the basketball court? Is this the same company doing the ceiling work too?
CH&D is doing the outdoor rec space and the off-field fencing
Are they the
wall.
ones that are gonna paint the blinds and everything?
Yes.
It's an add-on.
Yes.
that's a
Why,
lot.
why
That-
wasn't it figured in?
Yeah.
That was on, if you remember, when we did the bid
Yeah, I remember.
in July, and the bid was for the project, and the number that we had on didn't include that 20,000.
Yeah, I
And Scott
remember.
Meritzer said, when he was sitting over here, that didn't include the $20,000 to do the surface.
Why
And
didn't
we
they
said,
figure
well,
that
then
all in
that's
the
something we're
original-
gonna need.
Why didn't they figure that all in the original bid?
It was on the original bid, but we didn't put it into that,
Should've been all one thing.
when we did that in July. And we couldn't add it that
Honestly, it just
evening.
sounds like an arbitrary number too, but, yeah, let's say 20 grand.
So let me go,
Yeah, 'cause like if you're
So
making
they
a
couldn't
bid
bid
for
that
a
out themselves?
That's a lot
basketball
of money
court,
to
wouldn't
paint
you
and
include
seal.
the paint?
Like, I
Ain't no cost
think,
now.
I would be more comfortable with seeing if they could get a bid, if they didn't put it in, have them bid out for
If-
that cost.
so it was in with all of the bids.
And is that number, comparable to the other bids? So if this was split out in all the bids, is this 20,000 comparable to the other bids that we had? For that add-on?
18,000, 20,000, and 49,000.
Okay, I mean, so it's not that far off.
But if you remember, this was the number that we had on the board agenda.
Yeah. Plus one.
So we're still below the next closest person
Yeah.
even without the, add-on.
So even with the add-on, that's still
Still lower
lowest
than the
bidder,
base
and
bid.
you have one contractor handling everything.
Yeah,
They're not
okay.
divvying it up amongst multiple contractors.
That
It should
just
be a
makes-
real,
Well, now that it's seeing it now, that it shows what it looked like.
Yeah, this helps,
Add
thank you.
on to
Yeah.
$100,000, like,
Not to
to
exceed.
exceed, not to
Not to
exceed.
exceed.
Yep.
Fine with it, why would they go to 20?
Back to work.
Thank you.
Contracted.
Then we have contracted services. We have CCP Blairsville. So just to explain this one, CCC Blairsville, we approved in May that went out to the end of June for physicals. And that's connected with UPMC. They reached out and said, hey, we're willing to be your school physicians and do physicals to continue to go out and basically extend the agreement. So that's what that is, it's an extension of that agreement.
But that's kind of a long drive, and they're charging $25 per student to do that, and, you know,
It's 12 miles if they're going to
They
the high
come
school.
here.
They
well, but
come
there's-
here.
They come
Right,
here.
they do, you know, so that's kind of a long drive for the physicians.
There's nobody else that wanted to do it. When they put it out, we couldn't get anybody else
Can't
that
get
wanted to
anybody.
do it.
I had a conversation with Judy Halico at, you know, at Excella, and, you know, her name was given to me by a physician that I know, and she said that they, you know,
That they
they were
should have
willing to
called
have a
Todd.
and they did.
They've done it for me.
And
I
they
already
did.
had the agreement from it and already submitted it because we moved doctors.
Yeah, and they've been
So-
wonderful with all the physicals this year.
And-
They actually came in twice.
And
for
they're,
football.
they're willing to continue at the same price. We looked at it, we've had other doctors and they wanted to, they're all at the same rates. But their price is going up and they're willing to keep it at, it already has gone up, keep it at that rate. And for all other services, for the school doctor, it's $1,000 a year. And that, I mean, that covers their travels, they're here probably 5 days for physicals. They write our scripts, they sign our orders.
so they're holding their price, and you're happy with the services.
Well,
Yeah.
what
So
was,
what's-
The big children.
And
But
the whole,
they-
if they're
they
holding
were,
the cost,
They were doing our athletic physicals
Yeah.
anyways, this just now includes that
They're gonna be
day-to-day.
they're gonna be the school doctor, correct?
Yes,
That's fine.
and we have one doctor for everything.
Right, but these guys are local, and they might know our kids to a greater extent than people from Blairsville, like they might already have, I don't know
We
who they would
use
go with,
UPMC,
but-
that's who our sports
that's our
medicine's
sports,
through.
we have the agreement with the
That's where our
sports
trainers are
medicine.
through.
Oh, in Blairsville's UPMC, so.
It's the same, yeah.
That, they're a UPMC
See,
group.
sure, that's who we use for, sports medicine.
And they're connected with children's too.
Okay. Just what was her price going to be, did you?
I did not talk to her about her price at all. And she emailed me like last week, we already had a commitment from these people that provided us an agreement to present to the board
It's only $1,000.
a year, yes.
That's
fine with
good,
that.
I'm happy with that, that's
We,
fine.
we had been in conversations with them for a month and a half.
Probably.
Leading into this, so. The next one's Westmoreland Case Management supports WICSE, for Student Assistance Program Services for the school year. And then Southwest Pennsylvania Human Services, SPHS, Behavioral Health Services for drug and alcohol management. The board policy approvals, so we had a first read, a second read, and now this would be the final, not read, but the passing, so. Any additional questions, concerns? And another question I have is, does anybody want any of these pulled out separate for a separate vote on
I
any
think
of
they
that?
should be voted on separately rather than as an omnibus.
Is that because there's gonna be a conversation about them? Because if we wanna have conversation about that, we should do that now, not go into the voting meeting next week and say,
No, just I think that people, I dislike omnibus bills, and so if they each have their own merit, then they should be voted on separately than as a gigantic chunk.
well, could you do it, Ken, this way, under the 100s, whatever it is, how it's 137, 137, 137, 2, under policy section 100, approve the 3 policies for this, under the 200s, approve it that way.
Mhm.
If we've had discussion, how many
Twice we talked
times,
about it.
if you don't wanna approve it, don't approve it. I mean,
Well, but,
The way I planned on reading it was recommend approval of the following board policies 1 through 9 without reading.
and that would turn it into an omnibus bill.
so are there any policies, Emily, that you think warrant further discussion?
No, I don't think so, but I guess it's just more of it's a principle thing, that I dislike voting for things in one gigantic chunk as though they're all somehow the same thing. And, I just think that's a bad precedent. Because at other times, there's, definitely things that like, well, this one yes, maybe that one no, and it's just, I just don't think that's a good precedent to vote for policies as a gigantic chunk, I don't like it when our, my representatives at the state or the federal level do it, so I don't think that we should do that. So,
I think the idea is not to chunk it all together, it's to save time,
Right.
Emily, and if there's no discussion, I don't think there's a merit in breaking them down, for the sake of breaking them down. And
They're still
precedent wise, we've been
individual
doing that for,
Yeah,
50
I've been
years.
on board.
Since I've been coming up to board meetings, I've done that way for years.
and there were possibly things that shouldn't have been voted yes on, but they were part of
That's
a
your
gigantic
opinion.
chunk.
That's your opinion. That's your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is.
I can see what you're saying, Emily. I mean,
Just don't agree with it.
but
yeah,
there's
there's a
still
lot of things
individual
we lump
policies.
together.
So is that, cause that we would have to break down the payment of bills for the approval of the finances, every single one, we do it when we
I
approve
know.
finances.
These are policies though, they're more like the law of our land, and so that's different than bills in my mind.
I have no problem counting the rate.
I don't have a problem either way, I mean, but is it a big deal if we read each one of them? I don't care either way.
Well, it sounds like there's no
There's no reason.
discussion for any of these 9 policies tonight. Doesn't sound like there's any issues with these 9 policies, so if that's the case, I don't see a problem with reading them as you are going to
So
inform us.
the reason I asked the question was, and Frank's correct, it's a time thing. If we're all in agreement that the language in all of them is what's agreed upon, then they're just passed as one. But if there's one where someone says, I just don't agree with
Pull it out.
237, and I wanna be a no vote to
Right.
that one, but I'm a yes to the rest, then that's why I was asking, we would pull that one out to then, that board member can still have that no vote to that one that they wanna have record of, I don't agree to that one. So that's why I was asking the question, and that way we can pull that out for any other discussion should happen tonight, but we can pull it out so that in the record, that individual can say, I had a no vote to that.
When you have a motion and you have a second, it's subject to discussion anyway, so if any board member has a position regarding a certain policy, they can fully articulate it to the public once you have the second and the live motion.
Okay.
I think the work we do is individual, and then you build, and everything's put together. So after the Lego piece is already built, I don't see there's a reason to pull out and
Well, but this
take
is,
it apart again, which I
But is
think-
there one that you don't like, Emily? That's why when we said we have the discussion meeting, so we can talk about it more. So if you, I'm just picking a number, I don't know which one it is, but say you don't like the graduation policy, let's talk about it now because they've already gone through first read, second read, we've made the changes. If you don't like the way, whatever policy, let's talk about it now and say, I would like that to be separate from all these. I'm in agreement with 8 of them, but the one I want pulled out, that's what Ken's asking us.
okay, on this particular section of board policies, I don't have a disagreement with any of them, but I do think that they should be voted on their individual merit rather than as a chunk. That's all I'm saying. I don't like it when as I said, I don't like it when our other representatives do it, and I'd rather not participate. And if it takes a little bit of extra time, okay, but I recognize I'm one individual person, and I see that as an important element of our job as representatives is to vote on things on their individual merit rather than just saying, yeah, they all look good. Well,
We've had 3 discussions about it, we've talked about it 3 times.
and that hasn't always happened in the past.
So he was asking specifically on this one. We can talk about that moving forward if there's other issues, but on this specifically for next week, that's what he was asking.
Emily's right, it hasn't always happened in the past.
Right.
Right, and
Probably
like
never happened in the past.
23 would get passed, and there was no discussion on it, and that really
Right.
did not set well with me at all as a member of the public. And now as a representative, I don't want to really participate on like doing that same thing that bothered me.
I just wanna
as a
point
member
out
of
that we
the public.
spent more time talking about whether we should lump them all together than it would take to just vote on each one individually. Just wanna throw that out there.
Well, and I think it should be talked about here.
Right, but
And
that's.
we did talk about it, and I think I'm more conscious of what you're saying. But if there's no issues with these 9 policies, I do think that we should move forward with,
Just read them as a group and vote on
As
them.
we
There's
usually
no
do.
problem with them. There's a vote.
I just hate for that, I don't like that precedent. Don't like that precedent because of what happened in the past where it was just sort of like, I'm not even sure if anybody even looked at the policies, like that, maybe that's not what happened. But that's how it seemed to come across, and
I can tell you the way that I plan on presenting them is how we did these ones, so that we'll put them out there, we'll have a first read, we'll have a committee meeting where we can then even go into deeper discussion on them. We'll go into the second read, and then we'll go to the vote. And that way, there's plenty of discussion about it prior to getting to a vote. Because I think we made a number of these changes through this process
Mhm.
already, which I thought was good and good changes.
Yeah, I'm happy
so.
with, we had a fair bit of discussion, and that was really nice. I don't wanna be like senators and, you know, representatives that vote on omnibus bills, and you're like, did they even read that? Did they know what's in it? And shouldn't you vote on the merit of each individual one instead of as a lump chunk? That's all. So, I mean, I know I'm just one person, so if everybody else, that's how they wanna do it, then that's the way it goes.
That sounds like it's.
The last item for next week, conferences and workshop requests, we have, a conference workshop request for Chris Thomas, Adam Jones. This is gonna have to change to retroactive because it's August 6th and 8th of 2023, which is next week. Cost of $1,949.07.
Is that
Yeah.
each or for both?
That is total,
Yeah, well,
Where's that money coming from,
budgeted professional development.
on this one.
And they are, in their agreement, they're allowed to attend one state
Oh, I
conference
have no
per year.
problem, I was just wondering if it, that's all. Not a
Yeah.
problem.
I'm sure it's an excellent conference, and I even think they probably learned some good things from it, but it came out in March. It came out in March, and we're supposed to be approving it retroactively.
So we had an
Don't
administrative meeting in the
really like that.
summer, and the administrators were talking about their professional development and opportunities that others have had that were very good. And one administrator mentioned to them of how great of a learning experience it was. And they said, it's their organization that they belong to, they've heard how the positives about it, and said, would you support us going to this? And I said, absolutely, I would. So that's why it's on there at that time period. I think it's really, really important for us to get our people to conferences and learning, teachers included. But that's why it was, that they learned from that other administrator and said, hey, we want to take advantage of it if it was that good.
Okay, well, could we do a little bit better planning
Absolutely.
in advance? Cause like, we had April, May, and June, and then the registration's actually already closed, which means they would have had to have registered, and now we're doing retroactive, and it's just,
I don't disagree with that.
yeah, it just sort of seems like now we have to approve it because they've already registered.
You don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Well, but
But-
You can vote against, but you can vote against
You
it
can
that you
vote
didn't
against
agree
it if
to
you
it
don't want
because
them
of
to
that
go.
reason or whatever.
Well, I'm kind of caught because I'm like, I agree with them going, but I don't agree with it being sort of dropped in our laps like this. Because if we, all 9 of us said, no, we don't agree with you going because you gave it to us after the registration ended.
Now, Emily does have a point on this one. It puts all of us in a difficult spot to approve something that's already happened. So what, we say no, and then these guys are gonna be forced to pay the $1,900? There does need to be a little better job on timing of this. And I think that's all she's saying, and I can see that point.
And I don't disagree with that, and we
Because I don't
had
wanna
that,
say
and
no,
we had
but
that
I'm like,
discussion.
just
And we
You
had
can't
that,
vote no if they're gonna go.
Yeah, you
Stick them with
can.
$1,900?
Yeah, like that's not fair
That's
either.
not.
but it comes down to planning.
Yeah.
Taxpayers
do
pay
that.
for it, it's not fair to them.
And it's part of their agreement too.
Forget that.
Oh,
Did they get
no, I don't
professional
forget any of that, John.
Taxpayers
Emily
pay.
has a very valid
I
point.
have no
They
problem with
don't
you
board
saying,
notice.
don't forget taxpayers pay for stuff like that. Let's not forget that.
I haven't.
We don't have a
forgotten
state budget passed either. So
Well,
we should be watching how we're spending money up there. The budget hasn't even passed for the state, so I remember when Dr. Amato was here, she wouldn't let people go to work on this stuff
that.
until
Now,
the
you
budget.
can vote no on this. if
I'm
that's the
not
case.
saying that, but let's watch what we do up here. That's all I'm saying.
Next.
That's all I have for next week.
That's it.
Sure, that was
Gladly.
Thanks.
public comment.
Okay, any public comments on the agenda tonight?
I just want to say.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Casey.
Hi, Casey.
I just want to make a comment about the discussion of, voting on what Emily called omnibus. No, I forgot what I was saying.
It's hard to hear you over.
Oh, I'm sorry,
'Cause of the
yeah,
air
there's an air
conditioning.
conditioner, I'm a low talker and a mumbler, so I'll work better, harder. Well, no, I guess we'll skip over it because I can't recall what he was saying, so maybe I'll do it in the future. But in terms of planning ahead for conferences and workshops, there's usually opportunities for people to apply for scholarships or have stipends or something. So I understand that's not the role of the school board, but if you're planning, there could be further research you can assign to the teachers or teaching professionals. That's just a comment I'm making. So, yeah.
I think we've done a pretty good job. A lot of grants will pay for this. But unfortunately, we were caught in between grant writers
Oh, I'm sure.
recently, so.
Yes.
But they do look at grants to pay for a lot of conferences.
And doesn't some of it cover, like, title, certain, what you do have professional development in it, and we normally, when we do say that sometimes, it'll say the cost to the district, or it's paid for by this grant, or, you know, paid for by the grant, the only cost to the district may be a substitute or
Substitute,
something.
charge the district.
So it breaks down.
Thank you
More
for
than that.
explaining that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Hi. Kristen Dinkel, I'm back again. We were away for, when you guys had the facilities meeting. I know it was like announced, but we were out of town, and we're also gonna be out of town next weekend, or next week during the meeting. So just curious as to, you know, kind of what has come, you know, what came up in that meeting, what was discussed.
Well, I think in the,
It was in July.
we approved a
Yeah.
couple minor projects. One was the outdoor basketball court, and the other was the fencing off the field. We are waiting for the specs for a much larger project for the facilities from our partner CEC to be finalized, so we can put that out to bid. And that was the comment made in the beginning, that we were told it would take 2 months at the June discussion meeting to put the specs together. And 2 months from that point was the end of August.
That's for air conditioning and such, right?
Chillers, air conditioning, it
Was the
encompasses
project.
a lot of things for the facilities. So that's where we are on a much larger project, waiting for those specs to be finalized, approved, so we can put them out to bid. And I mentioned to Dr. Bissell, and he agreed that if we don't have the specs at the August meeting, then let's do a special meeting so we can not wait for the following month and stay ahead of that.
Sure, yeah. And I know you're doing the fencing at, Offutt. Has anybody looked at the fencing at the high school? Like by the parking lot there as well? Cause it's, yeah.
You talking about
That's
the
not
one
another
that's-
scope, like they had to do this
talking
one.
about the
Yeah.
one
So there's,
swinging over Buddy.
Right,
the
yeah.
one that's tacked up,
Yeah.
tacked up to the pole.
Yeah, and we talked about those as not, we don't necessarily have to go through the big architect engineer for those, we can do those as a
Yeah,
separate
Dr. Bissell,
project, but yes.
Chris Dinkel, just hoping that something like that is in the works, and I know that, the other one often is in town, it's the one that people see for sure. But, you know, I don't need to tell you because you're up at the high school frequently, so, yeah, that's certainly about to fall over down the hill.
Yes.
Not that neither one is more important than the next, but the one at Offutt, we got cited by the city.
For sure, yeah.
Because
so-
of the wall, so it's
Yeah.
actually the fence and the
the
wall
Yeah.
so it's, we're
project
doing two
together.
projects
Yeah,
together.
Roger
now.
that, no, I understand that, and I know that has been a thing with the different boroughs, with Southwest too, taking a look at just the grounds at Hutch with you know, how the grounds are kept. I know that people, you know, the communities see these things, the town
And we
sees.
just don't know how many see, you know, the high school.
Sure, you know, it's anything, not to piggyback or jump in here, but I guess I will. Anything with paving, is there a paving schedule anywhere, Dr. Bissell, that?
So that's part of, so the answer to that is there one now? No.
Okay.
And that's part of that, where I said that goal of coming up with a facility plan.
Sure.
One of the things CEC did put down was, you know, what needs paving or concrete now versus, 2, 3, 4 years.
Sure.
But working with them to build a schedule so that it can be planned out as to where and when paving is happening, where and when painting happens, things like that. So that we do know and we can plan for when it's coming up in different locations. So is there a schedule right now? No, but there will be one, or we need to build one. Same thing.
Is that something,
a
is that
lot
something that's
of-
coming in-house, Dr. Bissell? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Is that something that's coming from you guys, or is that something?
Us
that you're
building
gonna-
the plan?
Is that something that we take care of as well? You talk about the fence and how we don't necessarily need to search out bids for that, or?
No,
well, I'm
we'll
sure you'll bid
search,
it out
we'll
anyway.
search for quotes for that.
Sure.
We don't think that we'll be at the bid limit, but if we get to the bid limit, then we're gonna have to bid that out.
Sure.
For the high school fence. The Offutt Field last year, when we were planning on that, we were hoping that we could get it on 3 quotes. They were at the bid threshold, we had to get the bid out,
Sure.
to do that one. The same thing with, the HVAC project that Mr. Metrosky just brought up. That project we approved last September, I believe, to do the project. Problem was, we need specifications for that project. That's where we had to go out and find the architect engineers, then get them in here, get them to do the study, and then get them onto that project.
Will, and this is just from like as a classroom perspective, I'm assuming that the AC won't be working by the start of the school year. I do know like teachers are seeking out and bringing in like their own fans because how hot it is. Like, is there anything happening where, the district might help out with that at all? I mean, I even know just in the gym, like, there's one big fan that we sometimes have
There
to
will
take
be
out of the
more.
gym to go to, for the hallways and things like that,
Mhm.
so that, we are keeping. I do know that the air conditioning was just recently fixed in the weight room, because we had them open for volleyball, and then Reach came in and said, it's fixed, we can close the doors now. So, I mean, that is one good thing, but just curious about that.
Yeah, we are purchasing more of the large fans, a couple more for the gym space, a couple more for the 3rd floor, and even looking at the other buildings, to have more of those. As far as the units, right now, HVAC anything, the reason why the heating, and there was something on the unit at the fitness center that broke, and that one part to fix was 8 months out, and so we said, well, then let's just get a whole new system. Well, that's 12 months out.
Yeah.
So that's a problem in anything HVAC, and part of that, the supply and demand. All the ESSER money pouring in, and a lot of that was for
Right.
upgrading HVAC systems, so the demand was very heavy.
Yeah, and that's what when I
And-
spoke to Reach, he said
Mhm.
the part just came in.
But we are looking at getting more fans. The problem with, again, these units aren't the answer,
Right.
and they won't work in larger classrooms. The single units that plug in, those don't work necessarily to cool off the whole classroom. Now, Nicely Metzger, they do run, there are other AC units up on the roof that do work.
Okay.
The chiller unit that operates in some of the classrooms, office spaces, those are down. Those are the chiller units that will have to be engineered back in. But there's AC in the building just in certain locations where the units right up above the multi-purpose rooms
Yeah.
where they operate too. Yeah. There's a lot
Yeah.
that we have to have discussions with the committee as far as how we're gonna plan out a lot of those things. The overall maintenance, the routine maintenance, it wouldn't necessarily be our guys doing those things, but like your example of the paving. to know that every so often this lot that's on schedule to be paved.
Yeah,
Just having a schedule.
I think it's important, I mean,
Yeah,
just throwing some coal pack down, it's, the work that was done at the high school is already, there's stone everywhere, just from general traffic. Different teams coming in to work out, things like that. I know our son purchased one of those spots, and did a great job. I mean, I'm being a little sarcastic. I think he put his name or something in his hockey number. But, it's the stone has been yard sailed over all of those things, just because it doesn't hold up. I mean, they do it on our street, they do it on Meadow.
We're in the
We've
cul-de-sacs,
owned,
they can't do it.
we're in the cul-de-sacs. It's never been paved, in the 17 years we've owned that home, if they just keep throwing that pack in. And that it's gone the very next week. And so, it would be nice to see something a little more long-term it's a little more permanent, for sure, which costs money, I get that. But, boy, it looks nice, and it rides well, and it holds up. So, that's why I inquired about the paving schedule. And, it's with every building, right, for sure. So.
Can I make a request that weed whacking and cleaning up around the areas be done, because they're a mess. And the mowing is superb, but nobody seems to be able to weed whack, and it just is unsightly, and it is embarrassing, really. And around the fitness center, I'm sure you're aware that building needs redone, but that shrubbery has to be taken out of there. It is so overgrown and ugly, and it's a reflection on us.
Correct.
And it's something that doesn't cost a lot of money, that could be done to upgrade the facilities.
Yeah, we've been addressing little, but I don't think anyone came in this way this evening,
It's
but
nice.
the landscaping, just in different locations. We will have the hillsides cleared again. We're planning on doing that 3 to 4 times a year at the high school, those hillsides, to keep them cleaned off for multiple reasons. The fitness center, yes, that needs cleaned up. We also need a new coating on those logs. Otherwise, we're gonna lose those logs. Fitness center's in need of a new roof. Maintenance shed's in need of a new roof. I think they had a D rating, which means 2 to 4 year lifespan on those, so,
We spent a lot of time this week cutting trees down when I had to go pick up at the high school. There's a whole bunch.
Yeah, Murphy's was in.
And even like the little breezeways going from the fitness center into the high school, the one is pretty rotted away, and I'm pretty sure there's a critter living
Yeah,
in there.
there's something in
Like,
there for sure.
You could hear, so, I mean, just little things like that, I think,
Yep.
just those
And if I could-
day-to-day maintenances.
If I could just jump in, it's just a discussion. Yeah, real quick, thanks. I see it's a disparity too, because, you got Johnny at Nicely, and that property looks
Right, and
fantastic.
He
Yes.
does
And it's a
phenomenal.
showcase, for sure. I mean, people are up and down McLaughlin, it's right there. But so is the middle school. And I was talking with Kristen just about this. Other than the admin and the clearing of that hillside, we were part of that Nicely butterfly garden. That was part of a donation now, at least the work and some of the stone. But we were part of that back in, we had just moved here, maybe 2000, right before we got married. I hadn't seen much since. And, you have those areas outside of the athletic, outside the gym, that just get mowed over. You have the benches out there that could use a power washing at the very least. We've got people from other schools as well that sit out there. Band people sit out there, people, waiting to get picked up. And I think if the building, with all of the building and the long-term plan to upgrade buildings, I think in the short term, like Lynn said, certainly polishing up a bit of the dinge that we do have, throwing into some landscaping would definitely be beneficial. I mean, looking in at the main sign into the high school, there were 3 tulips there, and I don't know if that's symbolic, and I apologize if it means something or was planted there in memoriam or something like that, but 3 tulips there and 3 tulips over there, and then where the stop sign was going into that parking lot, the stop sign was down forever, and that's just ground, I don't even know what that is, I don't even know, spruce or whatever, it's just bushes that don't look very nice.
I don't
And-
mean, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah,
I
No, you
don't
can
mean to
have a-
tack on here, but I just wanna mention that I live in Southwest Greensburg, and I've taken my son and my nieces and nephews to Hutchison Elementary to play in the playground for years. And I will say that on the lower, the one playground was torn down a couple years ago, the lower playground, when you come down the slides, the mats are all broken up, most of them aren't there, and they're giant roots that, like, immediately when you get off, like, one slide, I can't imagine a child that's not gonna catch their foot on the root trip over. So it's been like that for a while, so, I don't know, the landscaping around is beautiful, like the baseball field and the flowers near the old, schoolhouse, it's beautiful, but that's a complete hazard, it's a mess, that matting is torn away, kids are gonna break teeth all over, so,
I hear everyone loud and clear.
yeah, I know you do.
I understand,
I'm
and
sorry,
what I
Dr.
wanna make sure everyone, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And
Yeah,
Sure.
I know.
Yeah.
so, I hear all of this, and we will meet, and we will start looking like, what bites can we start to take? The other thing I want everyone to remember, that we have 5 school buildings, a maintenance shed, Offutt Field with those buildings down there, and 181 acres. So at some point, we have to say, like, we've got a lot to take care of.
And aren't we down?
we- So our incoming class.
No, I
with-
mean, aren't we down with, after last month we did retirements or something? Or maintenance?
No, we have to fill a custodial position. But we're probably down compared to where we were 10 years ago. I mean, we're definitely down from where we were.
And because they've been
Manpower.
telling us that for a few years that we needed extra people, so it's not, but unfortunately, no one has.
So we're down manpower, but the footprint is still the
The
same size.
footprint is same size, and keep in mind that we have roughly estimated 200 kindergarten coming in this year. But in 10 years, that number from PDE is 148, is the estimate. No answers tonight, I just, like, we have to think about that. We really have to think about that as a community, because it's the same footprint, less manpower, and I think that's why we really need to have a team to say, what's our plan, what's our plan with finances to both.
And that's part of the goals that you went over
Yes.
tonight, so.
But little bites, and
Yeah.
I do appreciate knowing what little things are there to
And Dr.
chip
Bissell,
away.
I appreciate the explanation for sure, and all the hard work of the board. And I have to apologize, it was built up, she jumped and spoke the last 2 times, and I had to get that in and be able to speak a little bit. But I'm kidding, but no, for sure, I do appreciate the explanation, I do appreciate the hard work.
So when we say engagement always, and somebody had to explain this to me, was that when anybody shows up to a meeting and they're emotional, they're engaged. So that's good. It's, and then let's work through that, so, yeah.
For sure.
Yes. Very quickly to Ms. Nichols' point, I noticed that we're missing the minutes on the board docs page for many of the board meetings, and I was hoping that there might be a push to get minutes for the board meetings.
Yeah, they should be.
They weren't up there, they haven't been there since before I left, but I thought that might have been with
We'll get
Mrs.
them up immediately, yeah.
Yeah.
She was doing that.
Right, like, and I understand
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
so it's just,
So there are those minutes, and then there are the official minutes too, but
Right.
we'll
okay.
get that.
I just haven't been able to find them, so I'm not
Okay.
sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's it? Okay. See you next week.
No. Lampus gave us the because he's got a lot of ties, so he'd be able to help you.
And now it's just.
And I'll reach out.